This is our fourth lecture for HOS 121 for week 5 around self and identity, and we're going to look at gender development. This is something we'll look at throughout the semester, but we'll look at some theories and some concepts related to gender development. So this lecture it's similar to the first lecture of the week, where we'll start by looking at some concepts related to gender identity and gender roles, and then we'll look at theories of gender identity and gender development. And this sort of sets us up to look at how a development of gender unfolds in terms of that aspect of self over the lifespan. So we'll look at that again when we're talking about early childhood. And we'll start by defining some concepts related to gender identity and gender roles. So when we talk about gender development, we're talking about we want to just make a distinction between biological sex and gender identity. So biological sex is the physical characteristics that make someone male or female. Gender, on the other hand, is the social construction of what it means to be male or female. So that involves socially defined roles and expectations, patterns of behavior that we expect from a male or female, society norms that generate gender stereotypes. So it's about what we expect from someone who's a male or female, how they should dress, they should talk, what they should do, kind of roles they should take on. But biological sex is actually the physical sex that matches someone's genitalia. Often these terms are used interchangeably. I guess it's because people are uncomfortable saying sex, but sex is the biological and gender is the social element of what it means to be male or female. So gender answers those questions like, how are males and females supposed to act? What roles are males or females supposed to play? And how are males and females supposed to look? And this is a lot of what children are trying to figure out. So children are being socialized around what it means to be a girl or a boy. And they're looking, to models about what does it mean to be a man and a woman as I become an adult. So and gender is also socially constructed, and it's also culturally constructed. So what it means to be male or female differs depending on the culture that you're in. So, and also it also depends on the chronosystem that we've talked about, related to the bioecological model. What gender means depends on the culture that you're in and the historic time you live in. So being a male or female 100 years ago in Australia would have been different. And at the present time, being a male or female in, somewhere in sub-Saharan Africa may be something very different. So there's something about culture and there's something about the historic time period. It's because gender has a biological basis in terms of our our biological sex, but it also has a social construction. Gender roles are a set of expected behaviors for males or females. So again, these gender roles come from being within a particular society and understanding what it means to be a parent, but understanding that a parent who is a mother and a parent who is a father, there's different social expectations for those two roles. And likewise, when you're someone's offspring, there can be different expectations what it means to be a son or a daughter and to be someone's partner. What it means to be a wife or a husband or a girlfriend or a boyfriend. There are different sets of expectations around these things. So you might think about what words come up for you when you think about these roles. Maybe you think of mother and you think of nurturer and you think of father as provider. So but then you can think, well, but that's kind of changing, isn't it? So gender roles undergo change. It could be that, and it is, that those roles tend more rigid in the past. There's some change going on. But there's still something where children are learning what it means to fall into these different gender roles and to follow certain norms in terms of behaviors. Children are socialized into their gender through gender typing. So children acquire the motives and values and behaviors that are seen as appropriate for the members of their biological sex. You're a boy, you learn what it means to be a boy. You're a girl, you learn what it means to be a girl. And even young children, starting in around age 3, know that girls play with dolls and boys would play with a G.I. Joe, like the one on the left. So, there are messages that are being conveyed by the different toys that children select about what it means to be male or female. You need to be strong, or you need to be soft and feminine. You need to, to give to others as the good fairy. You need to keep others in line as the G.I. Joe. So, there are again these messages. We talked about this also in week 3 when we talked about socialization. So, understanding gender is an outcome of socialization, and it's something that happens throughout children's childhood, but it really happens very intensively in early childhood. Children are very interested in what boys do and what girls do, and they will socialize each other. So the reading talked about how some children will enforce gender stereotype behaviors and tell other children, you shouldn't be playing with that doll, or that game is for boys. So children are not only being socialized around these kinds of things by adults, but they're being socialized by other children. The outcome of socialization related to gender is forming a gender identity. So having a clear sense of oneself as male or female, and where having a sense of what roles and expectations go along with being male or female within a particular society. And sometimes, of course, biological sex and gender identity do not fit. And we're living in an interesting time in terms of the growing awareness and acceptance of transgender people who feel that their biology does not represent their experience of themselves. So it's really interesting in terms of speaking to this theme we have of self and identity, in terms of what we know and who we are as a person, the way we're socialized to think about ourselves, and also what comes from nature in terms of biology. So sometimes those come together, sometimes those are different. So again, gender identity is one's feeling of oneself, male or female, as being part of one's core identity. So now we'll look at some theories that try to explain how people develop a sense of gender identity and how they develop an understanding of gender roles. The biosocial perspective, which is one of the theories covered in your reading, talks about how people respond to a child based on biological events. So this diagram shows, sort of traces that process. So there's initially, is a baby a boy or a girl? That can be found out now prenatally, or it can find out at birth, based on an examination of the genitalia or finding out about the chromosomes. And then people adjusting what they'll expect of that child. So having expectations already at birth or prior to birth of how a child will be based on their sex, being labeled as a boy or a girl. And so then being labeled as a boy or a girl, the child develops an identity associated with that gender by around age 3, where they will describe themselves as being a boy or a girl. And then another biological event happens around puberty, and this is when children start to develop secondary sex characteristics. So boys start to develop facial hair, girls begin to develop breasts, and these biological changes that are visible stimulate the person to act more male or female, and then because they're visible changes, it encourages others to treat them as, male or female, or become a man or a woman. And this leads to a stable gender identity as a male or a female. So this, this kind of points to the biological component of gender, and the reading points out that you can't just label people and have that be enough. If you label someone born with one sex and then they're raised another, often biology comes through. So their inborn tendencies act in certain ways that are associated with being born, male or female. So, this theory suggests that labeling and differential treatment influence gender development, but it's also about the biological factors. So this one really is a theory that combines the influence of nature and the influence of nurture. The social learning perspective in terms of gender identity really connects to what we talked about in week 3 in terms of socialization. So basically, the social learning view of sex differences holds that most behavioral differences between men and women come from observing and imitating others, and being rewarded or punished for how we behave. So it really speaks to the process of socialization. So related to the operant method of socialization, children get reinforcements, so positive reinforcement. They get praise, for example, if they act in certain ways. They get rewards for behaving in ways that conform to gender stereotypes. So, for example, relatives might give a little girl lots of pink frilly things, and then when she wears those things, say how cute she is when she dresses in those feminine clothes. A boy may be praised for his masculine behaviors, like doing well in sport, which reinforces that behavior and encourages him to continue putting his energy and effort into that area. And then there's also punishment. So children receive punishment, like social rejection from peers, being told you're not conforming, that peer pressure, for behavior that doesn't conform. So for a boy who wants to wear a skirt to school or play with a doll, he may be laughed at by his peers. And that's, that functions to punish those behaviors and discourage those non-gender conforming behaviors. And related to the observational method of socialization, children see how people in their direct microsystem environment perform gender roles. So they observe their mom, their dad, their grandparents, others, teachers, and they look for behaviors that are associated with the gender, like they may see females caring for children, males as protector and provider. And media, we've talked about media as being another powerful source of model. And so the reading talks about how television, books, video games, a lot of sources of media often perpetuate gender stereotypes, and children who are exposed to more television tend to have more stereotyped ideas about men and women. So those influences that come from the operant method of socialization with gender-conforming types of behaviors being reinforced and rewarded, non-conforming behaviors being punished, in combination with seeing people who are acting in ways that are conforming with gender expectations and gender norms, the social learning perspective says that's how we learn gender-typed behaviors. That's how we learn what it means to act like a male or a female in a particular society. So the cognitive perspective, so there's a theory called gender schema theory, and it's really, it is a cognitive theory in terms of how people develop. So a lot of our theories really focus on the social, and this one focuses more on information processing in terms of how people mentally take on board what it means to be a male or a female, and then how they adjust their own behavior and police their own behavior in a sense, but conform to a certain thing that they have in their minds in terms of what it means to be male or female. So, basically this sort of suggests it's not that children are just acted upon by agents of socialization. They are actively contributing to their socialization by requesting gender-associated toys and clothes, etc. So they have an idea, they form an idea very early of what it means to be a male or female. And, gender schema theory suggests that children learn from their cultures to be male or female, and then they adjust their behavior accordingly. So then they ask for the truck instead of the doll, and they want to play sports instead of, doing something that would be considered more female. So this theory suggests that children come to understand themselves as boys or girls, and they learn what that means by paying attention to, sort of selectively paying attention to certain role models and seeking out information about gender. And then they mentally that information about, how their culture defines male and female into gender schemas. And a schema is an organized way of thinking about something. So it's sort of like it's a little box in their head, marked male, marked female, and they make sure they put their behavior in the one that matches their gender. So the reading shows this diagram of how a boy or a girl reacts to new information in the form of a toy. So a child has a basic sense of in-group, out-group. So I'm a girl, and the child decides, is this toy for boys or is this toy for girls? And therefore, is it for me or not? And if it's not for me, then I'm going to forget about it. And it is for me, then I will value that toy. So, and there's research that suggests actually that the children do develop schemas like this around gender. So I think your reading talks about, children, there's research that suggests children disinformation that goes against their gender schemas. So if you give children examples of males and females engaged in actions that would go against gender stereotypes, they have a hard time remembering those things. So, if they see a picture of a woman sawing wood, they might remember that that was a male sawing wood. And so it comes out this comes out in the real life too. So often, people go around thinking, about males and females, and a male is the doctor, a female is the nurse. There's the stereotypes that we carry around in our heads about, what it means to be male or female and what that means in terms of people's behaviors. So your reading suggests, it puts these different theories up against the lifespan and the different periods of the lifespan where gender identity is really formed, and suggests that different theories may be maybe better able to explain what happens at different points in the lifespan around gender development. So for example, it suggests that the biosocial theory, which really focuses on about nature and how social labeling connects to nature and biological tendencies, that the prenatal period, when people learn that a fetus, the child that's about to be born, is male or female, that people already start to gear up their expectation of the child. And then from birth to 3 years, parents and other people are labeling the child as a boy or a girl, and they're starting to encourage gender-consistent behavior and discourage cross, sort of non-gender conforming types of behavior. So children are learning in social learning theory through modeling, by observing those behaviors, by males and females, and they're also getting certain behaviors forced and other ones punished. So they're really learning about what it means to be a boy or girl. And we see by age 3 that children have that clear sense of, I'm a boy, I'm a girl. They start talking in those terms. And then, the reading suggests that in later early childhood, from age 3 to 6, children have acquired a basic gender identity. They know that they're a boy or a girl, and so that's where they're really building up their schemas, their ways of thinking about boy and girl, and they are seeking information about what does it mean to be a girl or a boy, and trying to behave in ways that start to conform to the box they have in their heads that's around female and male behaviors. And then, from age 7 to puberty, children understand that gender is stable and consistent. So they understand that I'm a boy today and I'm going to continue being a boy. It's not that, next week I can be a girl. And they begin to look at models, the models who share their same gender, to continue to have attributes that put them in the box, of male or female. So you emulate certain role models who capitalize on what it means to be, that male or female. And then with the changes that come with puberty, there are ways that we, from boy or girl to man and woman. And so the different theories can suggest different things about, how people develop their adult gender identity. So this is just a start to look at this idea of gender development, which is a core aspect of self and identity, and it unfolds, over, most intensively from the prenatal period to puberty, and then it relates to other aspects of the self in terms of forming intimate relationships and what we think our roles are when we take on a role like being a partner or being a parent, for example. So we'll return to this idea of gender development as we start looking at the different periods of the lifespan next week.